Alright, let's not waste any time. Our first movie is going to be Kingsman, The Golden Circle. And I was I was interested in what they were going to do with this because obviously the first Kingsman just came out basically from out of nowhere and surprised everybody with just how not only how good it was, but how crazy it was and how big it was and just everything about it, how cool it was. Everything just kind of had this effortless yet somehow from out of nowhere feel of this is something that could really be great. So when they were going to continue on, because it also made quite a bit of money. I remember it felt like it was in theaters forever, the first movie. So obviously this was inevitable. But the question is that you look at the poster for the first movie and you see Colin Firth, Samuel Jackson, and Michael Caine. And you're like, well, how? Okay, I understand that Eggsy's the main character now, but it's like, it's very interesting to see how they're going to go into a second movie with nobody in the main cast at the top of the poster alive. So, but then obviously the very first teaser poster gave us the idea that Harry might still be alive. So going into this, I really had three particular questions, as I'm sure most people did. And that was, number one, how are they going to deal with the aftermath of what Valentine caused, because it was on such a grand scale and involved such mass death? How are they going to address such a thing, and is it going to have an impact on what's in this movie? The second question you want to ask, how in God's name is Harry alive? Surely we will find out. And then the third one was, for me, more so for me, or for probably a lot of people as well, the thing that really, like a really big aspect of the first movie that I absolutely loved, and is a big reason why I love it as much as I do, is Samuel Jackson's performance and his character. So it's like, well, we definitely won't have him now, so is this going to be able to rise above and be just as good without probably my favorite aspect of it? These three questions, about one and a half are answered. Well, I guess two, but for starters, I was a little disappointed with, unless it was in like fleeting dialogue, yeah, the gigantic events of the first movie during the climax don't seem to have much of a particular impact here. Obviously, we were dealing with the Obama who we only saw the back of the head of, and then he, along with many other people, exploded, and it's like, so what are they going to handle that now? Bruce Greenwood. I feel like Bruce Greenwood has played the president so many times, and this is another one. So I thought that was something I was actually kind of excited about, that they just kind of seemed to brush to the side, so that was a little disappointing. The explanation for Harry's return, I mean, obviously it was going to be something like this, but it's kind of to the point to where it's like, I don't know. And it was really hard, it was a very conflicting thing in general, bringing Harry back, because it was like, because Colin Firth is so amazing in the first movie, and I loved that character, but at the same time, one thing that really made Kingsman stand out, the first movie, was that scene when Samuel Jackson says, I'm just gonna go completely against what you're expecting here and kill the main good guy, just shoot him right in the head. And the whole movie, I remember thinking they were gonna back down on that, and then the movie ended, and it never came back, and we were to assume that Harry was dead for good, and the movie just went that far. And it's something that just really made it stand out in a way to where it's like, what this movie was willing to do to throw off the audience and go against the usual formulas or whatever, the usual directions. And then it's like, so it's really, it's great that he's back, because I love Colin Firth playing this character, and this character's great, but at the same time, it sucks that they had to back down on what was such a huge moment in the first movie, and just really left with an impact. So I'm still not quite sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure also how I feel about the fact that they basically took a Men in Black 2 approach with his character when he has the amnesia and we just have to wait for him to come back for something to trigger it. we can't quite deneuralize Colin Firth, but it's but it works in more or less the same way. So I don't know, but it is nice because what they could have done is brought him back and then completely wasted him and, you know, made Firth's presence here totally useless. They did make the most, I think, of bringing the character back, so at least they did that. And as far as not having Jackson's Valentine here now, our new villain being Julianne Moore, obviously she's not, this character is not up to Valentine's level, but she's still a very entertaining character, and obviously Moore is an actress that I really, really love, and here she is kind of, I wasn't quite sure if we were going to get kind of like, because I didn't find her or her character all that interesting in the Hunger Games movies, and I was kind of afraid we were just going to kind of get something like that, somebody that just kind of sat back and let stuff happen. But while she doesn't really leave her lair at all, come to think of it. It's still a fun character to watch. She's very delightfully evil, and she's so happy and excited about what she's doing, and the way Moore plays that is really, she's quite a charming villain, actually, despite the mass death she wants to cause. In that particular moment when she gives Charlie his new arm, and she calls it Armageddon, and she is so proud of herself for coming up with that. So she was very entertaining, and probably could have benefited from being in it more, but yeah, that's what we have. And starting off with our first scene here, bringing Charlie back as a villain, if I had known that before the movie started and I just heard it, I probably would think, I mean, I kind of see it, but I feel like you could do better. It works a lot better than it probably sounds, so I didn't mind that. But then you have this first scene. We get started immediately with the action, and this fight inside the car thing, one of the great things that really made the first movie stand out on top of everything else I said was how big the action was and how grand it felt, but also just how well done it was. Whether it be something on a mass scale or something within one room, like Firth annihilating the hate group. And here, there are definitely action scenes in this movie that do work and do bring back the style from the first movie in a very effective way. But to start off with in this car scene, it feels way too close, way too heavily edited, and way too CGI heavy to have much of an effect. But there is, to its credit, pretty much right after that, it's pretty much the same scene, is a chase, which is much better. It just looks much better in general, and we mostly see it from a distance, which makes it much more exciting. And it doesn't feel quite as cluttered on the screen. And not to mention, I don't know if it was just my theater or what, but the first scene is very, very distractingly loud too. Like the rest of the movie, like I said, I don't know if this is a problem and something was fixed in my theater, or if it's just the way the movie is. But this first scene is significantly louder than the entire rest of the movie. That, or I just got used to it. But if I did, it was very quick. So we were kind of off to a shaky start, but I still felt like after that chase, it was like, okay, we still do have something here. And so, going on, there is, you do also kind of wonder, another thing that took a lot of people by surprise with the first movie was how kind of surprisingly grotesque it could be. Like, one of the very first scenes is Gazelle chopping the dude in half, and it got more gruesome as it went. And there are scenes like that to where you can almost kind of tell they're kind of trying to get back to the grotesquerie that was like the burger scene. It felt like kind of half, she was doing like half trying to bring back some of the gory moments from the first movie, while also trying to be, just because it was the setting of a diner, I guess, Our Brooks and Drive, but that could just be the diner setting, but and for the most part, like, I thought maybe they were going to try to overdo it, but not really. Apart from a few scenes, it doesn't really try to overdo the gore aspect or anything like that, because obviously that's kind of like Vaughn's specialty when he's not in the X-Men world, which is Like when you look at Kick-Ass and how gruesome surprisingly gruesome it got. There are violent scenes in this that feel very similar to the ones in Kick-Ass, which obviously you can also say about the first movie. Which is nice because you can still kind of, it's that Vaughn signature that we've gotten to know through these movies. But then it's also well put together for the most part. Like I said, there are some action scenes that feel a bit up close and heavily edited, but then the way some stuff is shot and the way some of the transitions in this movie are really cool, like the zooming in on a bag of weed that turns into trees that's ultimately Julianne Moore's hidden lair is an interesting one. And then there is the when Charlie puts a hole through the bowling alley and we go through it and the outline of this hole turns into the ruins of a building for the next scene. So I did like those little things that were thrown in there to kind of give it this whole stylish feel. Obviously the movie's already stylish enough, but that helps, it enhances it. And obviously some of the sets can be very cool. I really like the fact that Moore's character is like obsessed with 50s nostalgia, so it's like this whole 50s nostalgia land surrounded by jungle is actually kind of a really cool effect. But then there's some stuff of this movie that really feels like it kind of falls short. We do have some surprisingly strong character work here. I kind of like the fact that it sort of takes away from the sleaziness. I know a lot of people kind of didn't like the final scene of the first movie because they were like, wow, that's just unexpectedly sleazy. But it actually kind of dampens that a little bit when he ended up with her. That's, I didn't really see that happening. So, and then we have Mark Strong's character who gets a lot more to do in this one, and he's a really great character too. And it's even that moment where, it's that very cliche moment in most movies when two characters get drunk, especially when they're usually quite straight-faced and they loosen up. It's a cliche, but it actually works and is really funny here, mainly because Mark Strong, as this character, is so appealing. But then we have the big part of the movie, the addition of the Statesman, which you would think is going to be a really big deal, and it's going to give this whole new twist to the movie, and what we saw in the first movie. Well, that's a little underwhelming, I guess, because we have the character we follow most after this is Pedro Pascal, who is basically the one that joins up with them, because obviously what was really heavily advertised and really got a lot of people, including me, excited, was that the Statesman were bringing in Jeff Bridges and Channing Tatum into this. And we meet Tatum first, and he's this character that really stands out and you really like him, and he kind of really has that... He has that Channing Tatum charm about him, but you can also totally buy this dude as like some big action hero in this scene where they fight him. And just the way he kind of shows that difference between the Kingsman and the Statesman, just in this first interaction with Eggsy and Merlin. But then they kind of find a way to make... For most of this movie, Channing Tatum is indisposed, and then Bridges has like 3 scenes, and then it's basically just the Kingsman plus 1. And there's hardly any of that contrast once Channing Tatum is temporarily out of the picture. So that's a whole aspect they could have had so much fun with and really done a lot with, especially with the actors they brought in. But it's like, it all just kind of feels like they didn't quite... Yeah, it basically just kind of starts to feel like the first movie again, only not as action-packed or as exciting. Not to say it doesn't have exciting and action-packed scenes in it, and not to say it doesn't have, you know, an engaging quality to it for the most part, but the thing about it was that the first movie just felt so constant. That movie just felt constantly alive and constantly going, and like it was just getting bigger and bigger as it went. Like just when you thought they couldn't get any bigger, the next scene would top it, and they just kept going. And this one has long stretches, and that's the thing too, is that there are some scenes where you can tell they're trying to go big, like the whole ski lift thing, but it's like this movie has much less action, much less excitement, yet is 20 minutes longer. This movie is almost 2.5 hours, and there are long stretches where it's not living up to what it could be or what the first movie was. And that is a letdown, but the big scenes that come are very good. The climax is very action-packed and very exciting and kind of has that multiple layers to it where it doesn't just feel like one big scene. It's like one set piece, then another set piece, then another, and then that's how we finish off. And I thought that was really well done too. But and there is a character, a major character who's how do I say this without saying too much? A certain character's fate. At the start of it, it sort of feels like really abrupt and like based on a stupid mistake made, and that makes it feel very kind of underwhelming that this would happen in the way that it does. But they do eventually find a way to make it big enough to where it is ultimately satisfying. So, satisfying, I'm not sure is the right word here, but I think you get what I'm saying. So, yeah, there's a lot to be desired, but when they went big, they did really go big, and a lot of the time, it does work, but those moments that don't quite live up to it kind of really... You just really sense that there's something missing from this movie. And like I said, adding 20 extra minutes, and, you know, bigger actors, Halle Berry, they've thrown in as well. And it's like, you just really, like, it's satisfying, like, it reaches a satisfying conclusion, and there are certainly big scenes, but it's like, and exciting scenes, but you just definitely walk away from it saying, there's really something else that needs to be there, and I think it might have possibly been, I think it's really weird how much they dropped the ball on the Statesman thing. How it's like, it's almost barely there. Like, it's there constantly, but at the same time, it might as well not be. And it's, so, I don't know, but, I did like the way they used Halle Berry. She's another one where it's kind of like, you could very easily see getting an actress that big for a part like that could seem very wasteful, but she does have enough of a purpose and setup that it's fine. So, yeah, there's definitely, yeah, so it's there. I do like it, but, I mean, it's really, like, I really don't think it's going to age well in the mind at all when it starts to become more and more obvious. It's like, wow, there's so much they could have done. And they just kind of, once they found the same road, they just kind of kept taking it. That's, yeah. We do also have Elton John, who at first I thought it was going to be kind of distracting. The fact that it goes well beyond a cameo. But the more the movie goes on, the more it does work and becomes entertaining and just a part of the movie itself. So I do like the way basically his whole reason for being in the movie, as Julianne Moore flat out says, I just wanted to cash in on what Valentine was doing by kidnapping celebrities, with hardly much of a purpose. So, yeah, so it's fine, but I mean, there's really, and of course, you know, like we were saying, obviously this had a lot to live up to, and the first movie didn't, because the first movie just so came from out of nowhere, and really was not, I think, what most people thought it was going to be, and now this one had to live up to that, and it's like, so it clearly has a much larger obstacle than the first movie did, but still, I feel like they could have tried a little harder to kind of get through that. And the thing is, it's like, it's even Matthew Vaughn directing, and it's like, when you look at, like, Kick-Ass 2, I know a lot of people hate Kick-Ass 2, but I actually like it a lot. And it's like, you realize that wasn't Vaughn, it was another director, and then you realize, oh, that instantly pretty much means the quality is plummeting. But it's like, to think that this was Vaughn doing a sequel to his own movie is another thing that just really makes it feel like it should not have been as underwhelming as it is. The fact that I think Kick-Ass 2 is better than Kingsman: The Golden Circle was... I don't know what that says for other people, but that's basically what I come away from this with. So, but it's still, it's fine. It's certainly fine. So, there's that. Our second movie is going to be The Big Sick, which obviously is a movie that's had a whole lot of hype. I was talking about in the prediction video that just a couple of weeks before this DVD release, they actually re-released it in theaters because it was gaining such an audience and such a following, and people were just really, really taking to it in a big way. And yeah, obviously our director is Michael Showalter, who was that just last year? Hello, My Name is Doris, which I really loved. And now he's bringing that. He's obviously been around for a while. I think the first movie I saw of his was The Baxter, and he's been consistent through this. And he's come to this now, which is probably easily going to be his most acclaimed movie, at least as of now. But you'll understand that I was also a little worried because another big name attached to this movie as a producer is Judd Apatow, and we know how that goes. So. And I saw that it was 2 hours, and I was like, I have a bad feeling that this might be a little overrated and a little overlong. But I didn't jump on that too much. Like, I didn't go into this saying this is going to be so overrated. But I did have to fight off, because I saw it so late. I really hate seeing everything when it first came out was such an asset last year. And so it's like, now you always have that hype in the back of your head for movies like this. Going into them now, so long after their initial release, and you kind of have to combat those to make sure that you're not trying to make the movie live up to something too big. Like I guess we were just talking about that with Kingsman, but, and so, obviously it starts off, and this, Kumail Nanjiani is playing himself, and who we know to be a stand-up comic and in some not-so-great comedies. I gotta be honest with you, I never would have thought I would have been predicting this dude in September to be nominated for an Oscar for writing after seeing him in Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. That never would have occurred to me that I would be doing that. But, and that still totally could happen. And the thing here is, I was getting vibes that, obviously with the Apatow vibe, the whole kind of backstage with comics thing gives you a funny people vibe. And then Mike Birbiglia has done a couple of movies like this, like Sleepwalk with Me, and that other one that I missed that had Keegan-Michael Key in it, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head. So it kind of felt like at first that we've had movies like this before, particularly in the indie scene with those Birbiglia movies. And you have, obviously, comics coming in and out that more or less play themselves. Some I'm not even sure about, like David Alan Grier. Like, he's there, and he's doing his job, but it's like, is he playing David Alan Grier? Or what's... There's a lot of that whenever you see these guys. And then, obviously, he meets his future wife, who we know to be his co-writer on this, who is played by Zoe Kazan. Because, obviously, with him playing himself, before I knew too much about this movie, pretty much shortly before I saw it, I was just under the impression that they both played each other. And I saw an advertisement, like a banner on IMDb, a while back when it was in theaters, thinking, wow, she looks a lot like Zoe Kazan. Well, that's because it is her, and it's only him that's playing himself. And it's basically kind of... I mean, obviously, it's going to be their true story of how they met. But at the same time, you know, obviously, I'm sure liberties will be taken to make it more dramatic on all that. So, immediately you see Apatow's name on it, and you see the way they meet, and you see the way they communicate, and it's, I don't know, I hate to be this way towards this movie, trying to do this, but we've just had this so often now, it's almost like, it's very easy to grow cynical towards, when you're like, this is going to be one of those movies that just basks in how real it is, isn't it? Where it's like, they're going to do everything, like, every single line they say is going to look like an intentional deviation off of a cliche, to the point that it's going to be blatantly obvious and you can see the movie's wheels turning from a mile away. And it's like, it's probably unfair to see it like that, especially because we should be encouraging going off the beaten path and all that. And yeah, for the most part, it does feel relatively natural between them. I wonder what, I mean, obviously there's the whole personal note, with this being his actual story and then having to perform it, for a movie audience. But still, it's kind of like, I feel like maybe we would have gotten strong, I mean, obviously when you play yourself, you do kind of still have to, I mean, you're still acting, So it's kind of like, I couldn't help but wonder, like, let's say somebody just wrote this and it wasn't based on their own story, or it's like a 50-50 scenario where you write your own story as a screenplay, but you're not, like, actually in it. Um, and it's like, I wonder what this script would have done with, like, really, really great actors. I mean, obviously, he's very good in a few scenes, and she can be as well, but they're not necessarily... I feel like with stronger performances, this movie could have really been something. And while it does still feel like it's coming from a natural place and a real place, it... I don't know. I just kind of feel like we weren't quite reaching somewhere. And I wonder if we had actors that could have really, really pulled this off with, like, a lot more experience in this material. Zoe Kazan's an actress where, like, I've liked her in a couple of things, but she just doesn't quite have that, I guess, or at least she hasn't shown it yet. I know people love her indie movies like The Exploding Girl, which I thought was absolutely excruciating. She's decent in The Monster, which came out recently, but for the most part, it's like, I do wonder how far this could have gone in the quality scale if we just had a bit more... I guess it would have given it a bit more push in the more big emotional scenes. Like I said, though, he does have the moments, like, there's a couple of scenes with Ray Romano where he's kind of going back and forth between serious and comedy, which is nice, and then the scene when he gets some crucial news and then immediately has to go on the stage, and he basically tries his bit, but then just goes into his real life and starts crying, and it's like people can't tell in the audience if this is the bit or not. That is a really strong scene that he plays really well. But still, but they do end up making it to where you can imagine it's a lot more so in the writing than probably what we're actually looking at. Like those moments that do stand out to where it's like stuff that seems pulled immediately from real life that you can in fact relate to. One in particular is the moment when he decides he's going to show her The Abominable Dr. Phibes with Vincent Price, which is this amazing, insane, crazy-ass movie. Like, going off this for a second, if you have not seen that, you really, really need to, especially since October is coming. It's every bit as good as he played it up as. Do not listen to her. It is not boring at all. And there's just the little things in there, like when he puts the DVD in, and he says, "Hold on, look away, the menu has spoilers on it." And it's like, that's exactly how I feel when I show people Barton Fink. Because the DVD menu for Barton Fink shows you the damn ending with the fire. And it's like, well, that's great. Now every time I show this to somebody, and it's like, those things you would not think would ever a movie would find to relate to you. Not even just the romance stuff, the shit like that. But yeah, the way they communicate also, definitely. There is a particular moment I'm sure everybody has related to many times before when she's having a crisis at his place with all his roommates there, and she's trying to sneak out to take care of this. And she does not want to say what it is because of the embarrassment factor. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure every human being in the world has been there at some point, especially when you're just getting to know somebody. And there is something fresh about the unconventional way they meet, but it's to where it's kind of like they don't just instantly hit it off, and there's not the whole, they do the whole Me Cue thing or anything like that. But at the same time, it does kind of stem into the, at first they kind of feel standoffish to each other. It's kind of like, there is a movie that I despise that Ethan Hawke wrote and directed called The Hottest State. It's who is it? Mark Webber and the actress from Maria Full of Grace, whose name I just forgot. And that movie is so bad, mainly because they spend the entire first half of the movie trying to be unconventional, talking about the conventions and relationships and how they're not going to come to that. And then the second half of the movie is fucking them doing that. And that's kind of what the first 15 minutes or so of this movie feels like. Where it's like, they keep building up that this is not going to happen, and then just cut, it's happening. And I know that tends to be quite a realistic thing if we're going that angle, sure, but still, it's just, when a movie that feels like it's thriving on not feeling like a movie and actually showing you how a real life relationship came to be, it's, I don't know, it's difficult because there are some really, really strong moments that really bring out that, the realism is so hard that it's like it punches you in the gut. Like towards the end when, I mean, I don't assume we're doing spoilers here because we know that they are married in real life now and wrote this damn script together. So, that scene at the end when she has come out of the coma and everything is supposed to be great, and then she says to him, but you do realize this is what happens, like, for a while everything is going to be, like, you know, rainbows and sunshine and all that because of this, because we're so relieved that this has passed. But sooner or later, it's just going to go back to, like, what we're feeling now, this high that we're on, to where everything's going to be great now because we've gotten through this, that's eventually going to fade out, and we're going to probably forget we ever felt this way to begin with, despite what we've been through. And it's like, that is so real that it fucking hurts. And it's kind of, when you've been through something like that traumatizing, and you feel like it's going to completely change your outlook, but then sooner or later, it's just going to be back to normal, and it'll be like that never happened, and you can go back to fighting about the small things and all that, completely forget about the fact that this person you love almost died. You'll still hate it when she does this little thing. And but then, still, it still has a very movie ending. But like I said, we know we're going to eventually get to this point because of real life, but still, it just, I don't know that they had to make it feel as movie-like as they do, because it's kind of like, you kind of, like, if I were to watch this movie and not know that, I would probably easily buy this was a work of fiction with how it works out, despite all the realism they try to throw in, and the fact that he was there the whole time through her coma does not faze her whatsoever because of the bad place they were in when she went into it. It's like, it doesn't matter that he cared that much, she's still pissed off, and still thinks that they are not going to work. And that he's a shitty liar of a person. But at the same time, too, this is another one of those movies where I get where there are those things where somebody can do something that just absolutely makes them feel untrustworthy, and you really can't see past it. But it's like, at the same time, given what it is that's holding him back, I'm a little surprised she wasn't, being a real-life person, that she's not a bit more understanding. Because that's a big fucking deal. That's a huge reason why that he was trying to keep from her. And I do understand from her, that's another thing the movie does well, is you can understand from both perspectives, where it's like, you do see where she's coming from too, when she says, like, I know it's kind of a selfish outlook to have, but at the same time, if you have to break apart your family and never see them again because of me, you're not the only one that has to live with that. I have to live with the fact that I'm responsible for that. And that's, I don't know. So you do understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it still feels like we're going through the same hoops of, can these people not just take a second to understand where the other is coming from without getting pissed and running out the door and not responding to calls and shit? So, yeah, even so, there are those real moments for sure. Much like most movies like this that are works of fiction, like I said, you would think this one would feel different not being a work of fiction, but really, it really makes you wonder how many, well, we're making a movie angles they had to take to change what happened in real life, or how they got to a certain point. And obviously it feels like, much like I worried about with Apatow, it just his name on any movie, no matter where it is, whether it be a producer, writer, or director, you fear the movie's going to go on for a long time. And even though this movie doesn't break 2 hours, it's exactly 2 hours, it still feels like there's a lot of moments towards the last 20 minutes where we just kind of keep... We're just not getting to the finish line for benign reasons. We just keep standing up and then tripping again. And so it's like, you know... I mean... I know there's a lot to address, but at the same time, you know the movie's probably going to feel drawn out when there's still like 25 minutes left when she wakes up. It's at that moment where you're kind of like, oh, well, there's only so much we can do after this, and this movie's going to try to do it all, and probably more. And while that might sound like a complimentary thing, I mean, it's not. It doesn't feel near as dragged out as, you know, Apatow's other movies, like Funny People I just mentioned, or Knocked Up, for God's sake. But still, I do. Like I said, those real moments do hit, but it's not enough to make this seem like it rises above another romantic comedy just because it's mostly true and stars the guy that all of this happened to. But there are still other, apart from the love story itself, there are some very strong aspects to the movie. The pretty much what becomes the plot of the movie is him talking to and basically working with her parents to get through this, and emotionally and otherwise. And her parents are Ray Romano and Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter is amazing. I do think that Oscar nomination might actually happen. And obviously she goes back and forth from being very bitter towards the whole thing, and it's almost, we see that this woman, throughout the movie we learn, but just by watching her we can tell from the start pretty much, this is a woman that's had a lot on her shoulders, and basically a lot in life that's kind of screwed her over, and this is just another thing, only it's like the worst thing that could happen to her is her daughter's life being in jeopardy, and the way she reacts through the rest of this is her acting out towards this aggression towards everything that's happened to her prior to this. And that she's still an understanding and caring character when we get to see her with her guard down and when she's like at home and trying to... We just see kind of the real her coming out before the bad shit happened to her, and becomes a really likable character despite her tough exterior. And then, the most impressive person in this movie, I never would have guessed, Ray Romano is so good in this. Like, he is... Like, I've never been, you know, particularly fond of him, but then again, it goes as far as Everybody Loves Raymond in the Ice Age movies. And it's like, apart from that, you have a few things here and there that he randomly popped up in, like Rob the Mob. And then there's some, and like Eulogy is kind of a funny movie, but it's the stuff he starred in that just kind of comes and goes. We know why it comes and goes. And I was wondering what much he could bring to this movie, and the way he's able to do the... We were talking earlier about the switching back and forth between comedy and serious. And the great thing that he does here is he can do both in great ways, but he can also do both at the same time, to where you're not quite sure. And that's kind of... That whole thing is kind of embodied in one line, or in one joke, when the Golf Channel line, to where it's kind of like when Kumail can't even tell if this guy is serious or joking. But even so, when it gets really serious, we know when he's being really serious. Well, there are those moments in there where we can't tell which one he's doing. But that's not a fault. That's part of the performance. That's one of the assets, to show that he can do that, and that it works for the scenes that it's in, to where it's not, like, you understand, it's not like we can't tell which one he's doing because he's not showing it well enough. That's just the way the character is, his personality, and he really brought that out. And he has some really big scenes too that really, really work and just really hit in just the absolute right note. There's even a moment that probably could have been a disaster, but just the way he delivers the line, it was just the perfect laugh. And it's him talking about a tuna sandwich and then jumping straight to 9/11 with no segue. And that's a lot funnier than it sounds, just the way he's able to go right into it. And I feel like very few people could have pulled that off the way that he did. So I thought that was a really great surprise, and he's definitely one of my favorite aspects of the movie. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. There are some strong scenes in there, especially with him dealing with it, like when Camille goes in the closet and he sees like her shirt, and then he has a memory of her in that shirt, and then the same thing when he's looking through pictures. Some really nice scenes like that, and it is a very good movie. Like, in total, it is. But I still don't think it did quite enough to kind of differentiate itself from, this is something very real coming from the person who we're actually looking at and his experiences, from from many of the other movies that actually do this stuff successfully. I know they're rare, but they're out there, and it kind of feels kind of on the level with that instead of going above and beyond and showing us something really real that hits a lot harder than, say, the fictional stuff that we've seen. So, yeah, it's still really good, though. I guess I just didn't take to it as much as people seem to be. Our third movie is going to be Captain Underpants. I'm really surprised it took us this long to get this movie. I had, somewhere downstairs still, I have a few of these books that I've had since, what, third grade, second grade, maybe? And I vaguely remember them, unfortunately. I'm gonna have to dig them out now that I've watched this and see what I remember. Though it did bring back some memories, like, well, going on it, we have our two main characters here, who are the creators of Captain Underpants, the little comics that they make, basically to escape from the boringness that is their world. And two very believable best friends for an animated movie called Captain Underpants, no less. And I did remember these characters vividly from the books once I started to watch them come into play, and the weird thing about this is this movie kind of feels like basically the all-around plot, like, take out the Captain Underpants stuff, but everything that's happening around with these two characters and the arc they're going through, it's basically like an animated elementary school version of Superbad. Because we have these two best friends who live not next door in Superbad, but very close, and they have this very strong connection. Everything they've done is together. They create, they do all that stuff. But their fear is that their horrible principal is going to send them to separate classes. And when they go to separate classes is when their friendship is going to break off, despite the fact that they live next door to each other. And once again, it's something you can surprisingly relate to, especially like kids that age. And the way that they can take these books that are like 20 years old and make this movie that still feels relevant to kids of today is kind of where a big asset is. And it's also relatable to us that read those when they came out. Like my best friend that I met in 5th grade, we were really close, and we would, like, you know, talk on the phone for like hours at a time. And we were like really best friends, and then we ended up going to different junior high schools. And then, just like that, that was kind of the drift. And then it's like, that's surprisingly relatable in this movie, only obviously it's humorously exaggerated because they still are in the same school, just in different classes, and the way they imagine how much this is going to change their lives is very humorous. But that's basically the point of the whole movie, is the whole... what makes everything so funny is how humorously exaggerated everything is, as you can probably imagine. And then, of course, they hypnotize their teacher, or their principal, into becoming Captain Underpants, the fictional character that they created, after he got a hold of their books. And that's where it stems from. It's not as much of a Captain Underpants movie as you would think of. It's mostly about these two, but that's kind of the way it always was. Captain Underpants just makes a very persuasive poster child. And you'll notice with these characters how they're the strengths of the movie. One of the things that stands out is the voice work by Kevin Hart and Thomas Middleditch. Two guys that by themselves I'm really not much of a fan of. But together they actually make these characters come to life in a really funny and, like I said, relatable way. It also helps the way they kind of play with different animation styles. And the way it kind of constantly feels changed up, and when they're there mostly in because obviously with the way it was drawn in the original books, it could be this movie could have been bland and possibly gotten away with it by saying this is what the books look like, but they chose to go like really big and really colorful and do the whole computer animation thing, and actually makes it work. It kind of has a not too dissimilar appearance from the Peanuts movie. This one's a lot more lively visually. And like I said, and they're able to take those old books and put these modern touches in them. Like the moments where obviously everybody has all the portable shit now. There is a moment when they use a boombox, and right before they turn it on, he like blows the dust off of it. And so the way they kind of made those touches to where it still kind of has the 90s feel, particularly where the humor's coming from, but none of it feels dated because they've updated it so much while still kind of keeping the same feel that they had. I imagine it was a confusing process, but they actually pull it off quite well. If there is something that I think is what makes the movie not catapulted into this is a really great movie like this, like in this area with this kind of humor and its demographic, it would be the whole idea that the meta humor kind of is starting to feel like it might be just a little bit behind. Because if this were to, obviously the go-to, if this were to come out around the time of 21 Jump Street, it probably would have felt like really, really fresh. But as it is, with the whole meta humor thing kind of taking over, it almost kind of feels like some of the jokes in this movie are, while clever, like a little late to the party. And it kind of feels like certain aspects of it have already been done, even if they are still kind of funny. Like the whole, when the movie ends early and they think they've wrapped it up and the credits roll, it was like, it kind of feels like the jokes in Man on the Moon or the second SpongeBob movie when they roll the credits early. But the thing is it's funnier in those movies because they use the real credits. But it's still, there are still certainly nice jokes in here, and it is very lively and fun and all that. And the way they are able to use the, obviously just with the title alone, or if you see some of the covers of the books, like all the evil toilets that do eventually show up in this movie, the whole idea of the bathroom humor might put a lot of people off, but this movie actually does it in a way to where it's, obviously it's lively about what it's doing, but the bathroom humor and stuff doesn't feel obnoxious. It's definitely there, and it's pervasive, but, it never quite feels obnoxious and in your face about it. Like, you never quite just want to say, alright, I wish this movie was doing something else, because that's what this movie's identity is, are those kind of jokes. And you do kind of are able to go along with it. It's able to stay charming. There's a point towards the end when the principal has read their books, and what he says is basically, he's basically describing the movie itself. So it's like, it's kind of aware of itself. And then you have those jokes, like, the jokes that keep coming back, like, when they call the teacher and they prank her to kind of keep her preoccupied in that room, and they leave her on hold, and she just stays there. And it's like they keep cutting back to her and they keep drawing attention to it. I think it's something that would have seemed a lot more clever if they just kept her in the background without ever acknowledging it, and never brought her in the foreground again. We just kind of saw her occasionally waiting in the background of scenes. But it gets a little too eager about its jokes and wants to point them out to you and, you know, go into them even farther, and that's, yeah, it does kind of fall short with how obvious the humor is and how much it's here, but it's still charming enough. There is, and they do bring in some of the stuff I remember from the books, like the, when they do the Flipperama thing, that's another way they kind of play with the different animation styles. I do like a particular moment when they do the Whoopee Cushion concert and the reviews come up afterwards. But yeah, it never quite goes into the territory of this feels new or this feels fresh. Because it does feel like a lot of the meta approach is, we're pretty much, that's just kind of what is done now. Like, it's very par for the course, when just a few years ago it would have seemed like everybody was breaking new ground with this, but I think it just comes just a little too late for it to really be able to be taken in with that approach. But it's still fine and does its job, and like I said, remains charming without being obnoxious, which was going to be its biggest obstacle, and it did manage to avoid that. But yeah, I would have just, it probably would have benefited from feeling a bit more off what we've been seeing with this meta humor trend, so there's that. Our last movie is The Recall, which is yet another pretty much straight to DVD Wesley Snipes movie. Wesley Snipes going to have as many of these as Steven Seagal is. I think he's got another one coming in a couple of weeks where he's like in the jungle or something. I don't know, I've only seen like a vague little thumbnail for it. But this movie
you can tell by looking at the minimal poster that I saw that it's basically another alien invasion movie. And so it's very confusing at the start because it jumps around so much. Because at first we have this very vague opening that looks like the opening scene of Gravity with shabbier effects. And then suddenly, just like that, we're introduced to these Friday the 13th victims going somewhere. I don't remember. And it's one of those cases where they're driving in a car, they're going somewhere, and they speak in exposition and drool over the girls that are with them. And that's the purpose that they serve. And the makers of this movie did not see Cabin in the Woods because straight as a damn arrow, they play up a scene where they stop at an old gas station out in the middle of nowhere that's very dirty and abandoned almost. And then, yes, they actually end up at a cabin in the woods. There is no parody here. There's one moment where a character walks up to the cabin and he's like, hey, you guys ever watch crime dramas? This is where all the killers live. And it's like, in a post-Cabin in the Woods world, that doesn't cut it. That is not self-referential enough. You are doing this shit because you are lazy and cliche. And the thing here is that, by the way, the writer of this movie is a guy named Sam Action King. The guy put Action as his middle name, the writer of this movie. Sort of like that asshole that wrote the Sharknado movies. It's like, I don't know if you think that gives you cred with what you're writing, but just don't, no. So, so we're doing the whole backwoods thing for a while. R.J. Mitty is like the only recognizable face among these people. Walter White Jr., you might remember. So, and obviously it's one of those cases where no matter where these characters come from, no matter what they look like on the exterior, there will eventually be a time where the dudes have to take their shirts off and they all look like they were born in a gym. And it's all these very, very cardboard cutout characters we've seen a million times before in this very cardboard cutout location. And the movie plays all this seriously. There's no kind of winking at the camera or anything like that. And you might be wondering, when in God's name did they run into Wesley Snipes? Well, yeah, he's the creepy guy at the gas station, but then he becomes much more important. There's always that run-in, as we know. I'm pretty sure he may or may not have called up Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins after they left. But anyway, then it gets so jarring that we're just doing this we start off with the Gravity-like opening, then we're doing the backwoods thing for a while, and then just suddenly, right in the middle of this, we cut to, get this, Alaska, where there is a base that's looking into this alien thing. I don't know. I don't think we ever go back there. If we do, it's like one time briefly, and it has no bearing on anything at all. So, I don't know. But anyway, then we come back to the backwoods, and we pretty much spend the rest of our time there. And we meet these characters who are hardly characters. We've got the douchebag, we've got the girl that's just here to die, and then we've got our troubled protagonist, the girl that has a crush on him, and R.J. Mitty. And the thing here is, a lot of this character is built upon the fact that this girl is trying to get this guy to talk, and the guy just looks all sad, like he's shy, and like he doesn't want to talk to her or anything like that. And they play this up for like a few scenes. Like, every scene with these two characters is her trying to hit on him or to get her to notice him, get him to notice her, and he's just kind of like, yeah, and he's not really having it. So, with that being said, explain to me this scene. The scene where we learn why he's so damn sad and why he's so not necessarily keen on talking to her and showing interest in her. She starts to grill him. She shakes her bikini-clad ass in his face, trying to get his attention. And then finally they go upstairs. And then she's like, okay, so what's going on? What's going on? And then he shows her his girlfriend. And he's explaining this is why he's sad. And she's like, oh, why did you break up? And he's like,
we didn't break up. And obviously the next line is, because she died. But, for some reason, this girl, who has been trying so hard to get his attention, and he's not having it, he's showing no interest whatsoever. He says, I didn't break up with my girlfriend. Her response is, I knew it. I knew this is so sleazy. You are such an asshole. I knew you just saw me as a piece of ass. And it's what? First off, he has not acknowledged you this whole time. It is you that's been behaving that way to him, not the other way around. Why is he's showing no... There's no other way I can put this. There's no way I can drag this on. There is just absolutely no reason for her to think he was trying to do something he shouldn't have been doing. And obviously they make that build up very clear with the long pause where they give her just enough time to say all this stuff before he's like, she died. It's basically like him saying fuck you to her for jumping to that conclusion that is completely unfounded. But this is the character development. These are the two characters that we're like gonna stick with. That's exciting, isn't it? So, and then obviously Wesley Snipes comes into this, and he does bring some much-needed personality, and he brings in what clearly have to be his own touches to the dialogue. Like, he does some things in like some sing-songy way, and it's like he's doing his absolute best to not realize he's wallowing in misery doing shit like this, so he's trying to be his lively Simon Phoenix self, even a little Blade in there probably. Passenger 57, anything to bring back the old Wesley Snipes. And so, but obviously, and of course I would say, you'd think he's trying to get through this, and it's like, oh, he just needs the money. I don't know, he's a credited producer on this. I have no idea how to take that. But, regardless of that, and to top that all off, when he does bring personality to the movie, he typically disappears without a trace for long portions of the movie, and then just comes back when it's convenient. And it's a disappointment. But he does bring the movie to a little bit of life when he's here. And then, obviously, we play with the characters some more. It does the thing where they all start to turn on each other because of the paranoia and the what's going on, but it's like, when they do this, there's no build-up. There's no lead-in. It's like, this is the part in the story where it's like, I can see the Sam Action King proudly writing on his typewriter, where he's like, yeah, and this is the part where it gets real intense, because it's like, you think the aliens are with that, but no, it's each other. But it's like, there's no damn build-up to that. There's no lead-in. They just start acting angrily towards each other for no reason other than this is where our suspense is supposed to start coming in. Brilliant. So, and we're surrounded by cheap effects too. I mean, this is an alien invasion movie with hardly any effort put into it. You can imagine what some of these effects look like. There's something that looks like a floating jellyfish, and one of the girls says, "Is that a drone?" Yeah, these are our characters. There's also some really outdated sound effects. Like when a dude has like a brand new camera, and when he takes a picture, it sounds like a fucking Polaroid. And the gun sound effects too, to where like Wesley Snipes like has a shotgun, and it just makes like a little pistol sound when he fires it. And there is, apparently people just don't want R.J. Mitty to walk properly, because obviously we saw his character in Breaking Bad and his condition, but then in this movie he gets shot in the leg and then gets it caught in a bear trap. So it's like, hey, you like this dude in Breaking Bad, right? Here, in case you don't recognize him, let me remind you by making him limp. And there are some scenes that feel like they could be effective, like the motion sensor camera, the way they use that. But that ends up being totally ineffective. There are a couple of moments where you, like I said, it could have been a chilling moment, but they ruin it. And then, yeah, that's what we have to go on, and we have to care about it. They think we'll care about it because of these characters. And it's like, there's actually a particular moment when, he's lost his girlfriend, so when he's talking to this girl, they got pissed off at him for supposedly not rebuking her when that's all he was doing. He's protecting her, and he says, "I'm not gonna lose you too."
It's like, that's how he feels about a person he said like 2 sentences to. That he spent the whole movie avoiding. He's not gonna lose her. And this is what we have to go on. This was just... I mean, I knew this was gonna be like some straight-to-DVD alien bullshit, but I mean, this is like another level of just not even giving a fuck. And it's like... But that's the thing, though, is with the way these characters are, it's kind of like, I think the writer thinks he accomplished something here. And that this is enough that we will care about what happens. Not even close, Sam Action King, whatever your stupid name is. So, that's what that is. There's nothing else to say about it. It's that worthless. So, we miss you, Wesley Snipes. Come and do some good shit. I know you've gone for a long time, but, you know, you're still in there. We can see. So yeah, there it is. Next week is American Made, I think. So that'll be interesting, as well as, I think, 47 Meters Down. It's like the only thing that comes out on DVD, so... I don't know, maybe it'll... we'll see, I guess. So, yeah, I think that's what we're looking at. Obviously, next time I do something, it'll be the Horror versus Marathon we're going to be having, with 2 a week instead of 1, so... along with the reviews, so... yeah, that's what we have. So, that's it.